The NBA trade deadline has finally passed, and what has felt like an absolute roller coaster couple weeks around the NBA has now officially all centered. Now, we're going to be joined by Walker Mehl of Locked On Hornets to discuss everything. Walker, nearly every NBA team got involved in some sort of trade, some blockbuster ones, of course. But before we go into the details of the Hornets, what are your initial impressions of Charlotte's level of activity and maybe the aggression that they had ahead of this deadline?
Yeah, I'm just trying to catch my wits about me now in my NBA trade deadline day dungeon, as you can see. So as I'm grinding tape and trying to figure out my opinions, I think I land on the Hornets doing a really nice job. And then shout out to Jeff Peterson for accumulating as many first round picks as you did. This is impressive. If you are dead set on making sure that you have enough draft capital to usher in any era you want to, whether that's LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller still being your dynamic duo and then trying to build around them. Same thing with Miles Bridges, who as of right now has not been dealt. We'll see with Miles, but doesn't look like he's going to be on the move either. So now if those are the three players you want to roll with, Dalton Knecht coming over in that Mark Williams trade, then that makes some sense with a bunch of first round picks to continue to build outside of those guys. The one thing is Mark Williams being someone that was traded to the Lakers, that was the most unexpected move. To see Cody Martin, Vasa Micic go to Phoenix in exchange for a first round pick and Yusuf Nurkic, that makes all the sense. In fact, I think that was one of the trades that we threw around when projecting what could happen. Did not throw around Mark Williams in any trade proposals. So that was pretty surprising when he was traded to the Lakers last night in the 12 o'clock hour Eastern time. Like it was around midnight when he was traded. It's unfortunate. Mark Williams was supposed to be the franchise center of this team. I thought that he showed a lot of promise in being that before the injuries took its toll. And you saw him, I think, look like a different player, really even more so the last 3 weeks of basketball. I think once he came back from the back injury and the foot injury, I think he played well initially. And then they started to ramp the minutes up. They started to rely on him a lot more. And I think you saw him really suffer defensively in particular, giving up 40-point performances, over 30-point performances to the opposing team starting center. So when you have an opportunity to trade a guy that's been injury prone and has not been playing well the last couple of weeks, you have a chance to trade that guy for an unprotected first, a pick swap, the past first round pick that was Dalton Knecht. It makes all the sense in the world to go ahead and make that trade.
Yeah, you talked a lot about some of those details. And again, the Lakers, once again, we're all trying to sleep over here. And here they are. We saw Luka, of course, getting over there in that 12:30 hour Eastern time as well. And here they are again. And we know that they needed a center once they got rid of Anthony Davis in that trade as well. What kind of hole do you think he will be filling for the Lakers? You talked about what he has been doing so far with the Hornets this season with some of his numbers. They're calling it one of the best of his young NBA career. And while he has had some struggles with some injuries, he has been putting up some good numbers as well. I know you are pretty high on Mark Williams.
Yeah, I was a big fan, right? I think the last couple of weeks more so defensively, you've really seen him struggle. And that's the issue because you did draft him as a rim protector, as someone that could be a really productive defender in drop coverage. The thing is, when you drafted him, he was a really athletic 7'1" guy that had the tallest standing reach in the NBA or among them at 9'9". So the fact that you had that kind of body that could also defend on the perimeter, that was really valuable. But I do think the injuries really took its toll on Mark Williams, especially as you saw what happened the last month of basketball, 3 weeks, whatever the timeline is. I do think that you started to see him struggle, which made him expendable, and that allowed the Hornets to call LA. What is LA getting in Mark? I think right now what you're getting in Mark Williams, as it stands on February 6th, you're getting someone that offensively can be an excellent lob threat closer to the basket. So if Luka Doncic and LeBron James, elite passers in the league, they are going to be bringing some of the defense closer to them, which is going to leave Mark Williams open right at the basket for some easy dunks. I expect a lot of dunks over there in Los Angeles. I think you're going to see a lot of minutes for Mark, even if that's not necessarily the best thing, because they don't have a lot of big man depth. They just got rid of Anthony Davis, who's a Defensive Player of the Year candidate this season, and you're going to get somebody that's not that in Mark Williams. And so there's going to be some struggles when you're asking Mark to play a big part in that team defense. And so their defense is going to struggle. The question about Mark is, can he recapture what he looked like before some of these injuries and what he looked like his rookie season and the first 20 games, 15 games that he played his sophomore season in the NBA. If you can get that Mark Williams back and then see how he projects from that standpoint, then there's a real shot that the Lakers did win this trade going over, that he can be your franchise center for the next 5, 7, 8 years or so. But right now, it just doesn't look like that, especially with so much value from a center coming with the fact that you can protect the rim, which he just hasn't been very good at this year.
You said how the Lakers were maybe lacking center depth after the Davis trade. Well, then you take a look at what the Hornets now have after that trade for Mark Williams, and you go through the roster, no centers. So they did go out and they did make a trade in the final hour before the trade deadline, getting Yusuf Nurkic from Phoenix. This is a guy who's actually been a little disgruntled in the last month or so because of his lack of starts and playing time. His relationship with the team and the coaches hasn't been as great. So maybe this is someone who has a little bit of a fire under him to come in, immediately make an impact with a new team, especially someone who's been in the NBA for some time at this point. What are your impressions on Nurkic coming to the Hornets?
You're not wrong. They needed a big guy after they just traded Mark Williams. You know, you were talking about Moussa Diabate, whom I love, but he's also about 6'8". He's a really athletic center, but he's not a center. He's more of a power forward. So you needed somebody that could truly be a center for this team. And now Nurkic is going to be that guy. You don't have to rely on older Taj Gibson. You don't have to rely on the smaller Moussa Diabate. So Nurkic is going to just be a big body, which is a compliment, honestly, for this team. You need that. This is a salary dump for Phoenix. They're just paying him way too much money. They want to free up some money to go after other stars potentially on the trade market. And it was harder to do that with Nurkic. And so that's why Charlotte is getting back a first round pick to take on all of the money that they're paying Nurkic, which is about $19 million for the next couple of seasons. So we'll see just how long he is for Charlotte. But this is good business from Jeff Peterson. Really, you're collecting another first round pick to put in your treasure chest now of first round picks. And that's just a lot of currency. That's a lot of dough. You got to make some other deals happen potentially this offseason or in the first half of this next season. You have a lot of flexibility on how you can build your team with all these first round picks that you have. So that's the real deal coming in here. You did get a center and you needed a body out there to play with you. So that's a big deal to have Nurkic coming over to Charlotte just to give you a center. But the first round pick, I think, is the thing that's the most valuable thing coming back.
So that is a first-round pick for 2026. The Hornets now own a first-round pick in at least the next 7 years. So this is bringing that draft stock capital up higher and higher, as you were mentioning. While they might be using it as some trading capital moving forward, it also could be about rebuilding this young team into something further. You know, they have these younger stars, as we mentioned, with Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball, and trying to build around them. How do you think that this could help kind of bring the new vision of a new age Hornets to life?
Yeah, I mean, so if you're going to build around LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, you got a lot of first round picks to work with where you can go after some of the forwards that really help and accentuate their games, right? So with LaMelo, he's already such a high usage player. Plus, I think the gravity surrounding him is real strong. Players don't want him to get any free looks from three-point land because he's a really good shooter. And so perhaps to combat that style of play, you create a little more space with other shooters. And then so you can have some guys like Miles Bridges get downhill and score at the basket, which is what he does best for this team. So really, you have so many firsts that you can go after the right type of players that really complement a LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. It's unfortunate we won't see Brandon Miller again this year with that wrist injury, because I would really love to see as many reps as possible with those two guys in your backcourt. But you do have Dalton Knecht as well. So it'll be interesting to see how he fits in all of this, just bringing in more shooting. He was an excellent shooter at Tennessee. He has a 9 3-point game already, three-pointer game already this year, and he's shooting about 36% from three, which is good. They need that help. So you got some shooting, you got some picks to work with to just go get some players that complement your best player on the roster in LaMelo Ball and somebody in the future that you depend a lot on in Brandon Miller.
Yeah, Dalton Knecht is someone who did prove himself as a rookie in the first half of his season with LA. We will see what he will be doing once he joins Charlotte. This is, of course, the overarching question, but I have to ask you, what would be your grade on how the Hornets did this NBA trade deadline?
Yeah, man, I think I might go to an A- here. Okay. The only reason I wouldn't go just a flat out A is because you are giving up on a guy that I do think has some real high potential in Mark Williams. So I'm anywhere in that B plus A minus range, but I go with A minus because there are so many ways to improve your team now with all these first round picks that you have. Other GMs find those picks really valuable. And even if you would argue it doesn't guarantee you that you're going to get a talented player with the first round pick if you use that selection, other GMs would like to go get that. And then they'll be willing to give you a king's ransom for some of these selections that you have in the upcoming NBA draft. So I do think the fact that you've stockpiled all those picks is a big deal. The fact that you got, I would say, 120 cents on the dollar trading Mark Williams out. I think you got more in return for what Mark Williams is right now. The only reason I dock it just a little bit, because Mark Williams could allow the Lakers to win this trade. If the high upside potential hits for Mark, which, remember, it looked like it was going to hit when he played his rookie season and the little bit that he did his second year in the league. If that version of Mark Williams hits, yeah, the Hornets are going to be without a franchise center that they just traded for Dalton Knecht and some picks. While great, there's still some questions about that on how you can build your team. So that would be the only reason I dock it just a little bit, but it's an A minus. It's hard to get much better than that.
The Lakers are just one of the many teams around the NBA who made a massive deal, of course, getting Luka Doncic and trading away Anthony Davis. We saw Jimmy Butler get traded. We saw De'Aaron Fox. What has just been your impression on the past couple of weeks in the NBA sphere? I mean, this has to be one of the crazier trade deadline times that I could at least remember.
It feels like every time we go into a trade deadline, it under-delivers. It feels like that happens more often than not. Not this year. I mean, depending on how far you want to go out, this thing gets rolling on a Saturday when Luka Doncic is announced to the Lakers, which is one of the weirdest and biggest trades, not of the last decade, but of all time. I mean, it has that type of impact. It has those types of ramifications on Luka being with the most historic franchise for the next 10 years, possibly, if he signs that Supermax extension. So the fact that you have Luka moving on, the fact that Jimmy Butler, that saga comes to an end, which was a wild ride, and eventually he goes to Golden State to team up with Steph Curry, and coming back to Miami is Andrew Wiggins, who played a huge part on their most recent championship team. So yeah, it's wild. It's probably the wildest trade deadline that I can remember. And it started off really with the craziest trade I can remember.
Honestly, I think the biggest winner of this whole NBA trade deadline time was you for the tweet of the century with the Connect from Kannapolis. That is going to be said
Eric
everywhere.
Collins.
I'm already thinking you should trademark that one right now.
Thank you. Eric, you can use it, but you got to pay me, and we can talk later. I'll get my people to your people, and we'll see what we can work out.
I think we can make that work. Walker, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. I appreciate it.